There are many ways that Vince McMahon could choose to indirectly bury a WWE star. He could, for example, have them go out there and participate in an angle or match that had no chance of success, or he could instruct his commentators to run them down from the announce table. There are many ways of burying a talent like this, but on rare occasions, McMahon would choose to take the direct route and simply speak his mind in a public setting. I'm Sam Driver from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 times Vince McMahon publicly buried WWE stars. Join us! Number 10. The Ultimate Warrior. Vince McMahon had a special relationship with everyone who was a tippy-top star for WWE, and Jim Hellwig was no exception. The heir apparent to Hulk Hogan had a close bond with not just Vince, but also Linda McMahon, and occasionally spent time at their Connecticut home. But at the end of the day, professional wrestling was a business to the Ultimate Warrior, and the demands he made, both financial and creative, frequently put a strain on the relationship between the performer and the promoter. Warrior left WWE acrimoniously on various occasions, and lawsuits were filed between the two sides. WWE, in a Vince McMahon-sanctioned project, went to the extreme length of releasing an entire self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior DVD set, which was basically a feature-length character assassination of Hellwig and his famous creation. Years prior to that, during a 1998 appearance on TSN's Off the Record, Vince branded Warrior a lunatic. There was no shortage of bad blood between McMahon and Warrior, yet they ultimately buried the hatchet, and Warrior was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame mere days before he shockingly passed away. Number 9. Jesse Ventura. While they were very different as people and performers, the Ultimate Warrior and Jesse Ventura shared that they were unafraid to tangle with Vince McMahon backstage, or, as it transpired, in the courtroom. The Body famously attempted to get the WWE locker room to unionize ahead of WrestleMania 2, before Hulk Hogan stooged off the plan to McMahon, who was furious that Ventura had tried to rally the troops against him. In 1991, Jesse sued McMahon and WWE over royalties he claimed he was due but had not been paid. The court sided with Ventura, awarding him over $800,000. In response, McMahon vowed that the Body would never appear on WWE programming again, and WWE later removed Ventura's commentary from subsequent home video releases in order to avoid paying him more royalty money. During the aforementioned 1998 appearance on Off the Record, McMahon said that Ventura was overrated at the time and is still confused about his place in history in the WWF. Of course, McMahon would ask the Minnesota governor to work for him in the future, including for the doomed XFL Football League, during which Vince was publicly critical of Ventura's announcing. Number 8. Jeff Jarrett. Fair play to Jeff Jarrett, who walked out on Vince McMahon and the WWE not once, but twice. The first time, Double J left over creative frustrations, returned after about 5 months, and then left again a couple of months after that. Following a 1-year run in WCW, Jarrett re-signed with WWE, only to once again walk away a couple of years later. This time, the Chosen One demanded he be paid a large amount of money he was owed in order to drop the Intercontinental title to China at No Mercy 99 prior to going back to WCW. It should come as no surprise that McMahon was apoplectic both times Jarrett opted to walk away without giving proper notice. And when Vince bought WCW in March of 2001, he hadn't forgotten the former IC champion's actions. On the historic Raw Nitro simulcast, McMahon suggested that Jarrett would no longer spell his name Jeff, but capital G, O-O-N-N-E. Wait, he wanted Jeff Jarrett to become a member of the Goonies? Oh, right. No, I see. Gone. Jarrett initially thought that Vince was shooting an angle with him before realizing that he had, in fact, been fired for real. Well, ain't that great? Number 7. Lex Luger. You only needed to take one look at Lex Luger during his 90s prime to understand why Vince McMahon would absolutely adore him. The good-looking all-American boy with the body chiseled out of granite very much fit the mold of what McMahon looked for in his top WWE star, and in the summer of '93, the company went all out in pushing Luger as their next big hero. Traveling the country on his Lex Express tour bus, the total package was positioned as the successor to Hulk Hogan, who had not long left the promotion. Unfortunately, Luger didn't quite catch on with the masses as hoped, and a couple of years later, he opted opted to return to WCW right as the Monday Night Wars were about to begin. Lex was able to do so as he wasn't actually under a WWE contract at the time, and the manner in which he jumped ship caused McMahon to hold a grudge. Not only did Vince not bring Luger back after WWE bought WCW, he also kicked Lex while he was down by playing the 911 call from when Luger's partner Miss Elizabeth died. And during the Mr. McMahon Netflix documentary, Vince unfavorably compared Lex to Hogan and surmised that he was okay, but an overall disappointment. Number 6. Cesaro. At WrestleMania 30, Cesaro soaked in the adulation of tens of thousands of fans after he eliminated The Big Show to win the first ever Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. 8 months later, Vince McMahon went on Stone Cold's podcast and publicly declared that the Swiss Superman lacked the charisma and verbal skills to become a main player, before concluding that he simply didn't have the it factor. Needless to say, Cesaro, who listened to the podcast while driving to the next town, was not entirely happy with McMahon's assessment and later said that he couldn't disagree more with the chairman's comments. The very next day, Cesaro walked into Vince's office, simply said, "Challenge accepted," and set about trying to grab the metaphorical brass ring that Vince McMahon claimed his roster full of millennials were unwilling to reach for. Vince did say that the former US champion was a tremendous physical specimen, but many people thought his overall comments about Cesaro were harsh, while pointing to the inconsistent booking that had not exactly helped his cause to get over. Number 5. Randy Orton. As a third-generation prospect who picked up the business at a rapid pace, for a long time it felt as though Randy Orton could really do no wrong. In the face of reports that the Legend Killer's backstage attitude left a lot to be desired, Orton continued to receive push after push and got a pass for various indiscretions that would have got lesser stars fired on the spot. But acting out or terrorizing his female co-workers weren't the evils that caused Vince McMahon to go off on Orton on the May 16, 2005 episode of Raw. Losing weight was. Randy was fresh off shoulder surgery when he came out for a promo, ostensibly to build to a future match with Batista, while claiming he was ineligible to be drafted due to being on the injured list. McMahon then came out to not only contradict Orton on the draft thing, but to rip into the former World Heavyweight Champion for his weight loss. Vince roasted Randy for having a neck like a stack of dimes before asking him if he was on some sort of anorexic diet. Nope, there was absolutely no pressure from Vince for his wrestlers to be as muscular as humanly possible at all times. None whatsoever. Number 4. Tajiri and Rhino. In the summer of 2003, Vince McMahon hit the road with the SmackDown crew and made a series of appearances at non-televised house shows in a bid to boost flagging attendance figures. As well as performing on the shows themselves, McMahon got to watch what was going on firsthand, something that would spell bad news for Tajiri and Rhino. The Japanese Buzzsaw and the Man Beast were in the middle of their match in Uniondale, New York on August 31st, when McMahon marched out and told both of them to return to the locker room immediately. The crowd had been chanting "boring" while Rhino had Tajiri in a chinlock, and the former ECW heavyweight champion had, as instructed by an unnamed road agent, sat on the hold for longer. McMahon simply strolled out, said that he agreed with the crowd that the match was boring, and then told his wrestlers to hit the bricks so they could start the scheduled bikini contest. Rhino later revealed that Vince was apologetic for the in-ring burial and that his paycheck for that particular show was double what it should have been, but it was still a chastening experience for both him and Tajiri. Number 3. Bret Hart. Between 1984 and 1997, Bret Hart was a rock for Vince McMahon and WWE. The hard-working hitman barely put a foot wrong during the course of a 13-year career that saw him go from anonymous undercard guy to tag team specialist to world champion and then one of WWE's most popular all-time stars. And then, in one night, everything changed. At the 1997 Survivor Series, McMahon conspired to screw Hart out of the WWE title in the show's main event, creating a rift between Bret and Vince that never fully healed. Was McMahon remorseful for what he'd done to one of his loyal soldiers? On the contrary, Vince put the blame on the excellence of execution himself, famously claiming that Bret screwed Bret in an interview broadcast on Raw. After that fateful night in Montreal, McMahon was far from shy when it came to sticking the knife in on a performer he tried to paint as a bitter man who took himself far too seriously. There were many cases of Vince burying Bret in public, and vice versa, to be fair, and WWE were even planning a self self-destruction-like DVD entitled Screwed, before fences were mended enough for Hart to join the project and accept a Hall of Fame induction. Number 2. Hulk Hogan. There's an argument to be made that WWE's mid-80s national expansion might not have worked, and certainly might not have worked as well, if it wasn't powered by Hulkamania. Hulk Hogan was the guy for McMahon during that particular decade, and continued to be a major star for WWE in the early 90s before leaving the organization in 93. Vince had wanted Hogan to be WWE's Babe Ruth, and act as an ambassador who did the occasional major match, but Hulk opted to try his luck in Hollywood before signing with WCW. Asked about Hogan by presenter Chet Kopek during an appearance on New Sport Talk in October of '94, McMahon claimed that Hogan never had a fantastic physique during his prime, no abs, and had gotten old and slow prior to his WWE departure. Expressing his disappointment that the Hulkster opted to join a minor league operation after supposedly telling Vince he'd never work for the competition, McMahon noted that everyone remembers Johnny Unitas playing for the Colts, no one remembers Johnny Unitas playing for the Chargers. Hogan and McMahon had a long and at times complex relationship filled with highs and lows, which often resulted in them taking public shots at one another. And number 1, Steve Austin. Aside from the Hulkster, there are few stars in the history of WWE who made as much money for Vince McMahon as Steve Austin did. The Texas Rattlesnake was one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, that WWE's fortunes turned around in the late 90s, enabling them to win the so-called Monday Night War with WCW. Austin, a fiercely driven individual who was determined to keep his top spot, was given more leeway than most, which included turning down creative pitches for angles, matches, and even storylines. But if he was hard to work with, he was worth it. That is, until he didn't show up to work at all. Being asked to put over Brock Lesnar in a random Raw match was the straw that broke the already burnt-out bionic redneck's back, and he chose to walk out of the company. McMahon responded by not only cutting a scathing promo on Austin that very night, but by dedicating an episode of WWE's new show Confidential to scolding Stone Cold for his decision to take his ball and go home. They ended up reconciling months later, but the sheer strength of McMahon's public burial caused fans and wrestlers alike to wonder if they'd seen the last of Steve Austin in WWE.